All right. So for Catherine, we're recording this. Sorry. So okay. All right. So what we're gonna do though, so that this distinction, sorry, original man, we talked about original man, historical man, eschatological man. That's not in the actual theology of the body. I stole that from Christopher West, who sort of that's how he breaks it up, and it sort of intuitively makes sense to me. So that's how we'll break it up. All right. So as I talked about, I think one of the things that John Paul II does is he milks scripture for pretty much every possible like ounce of truth that you can get out of it. Right. And so theology of the body, like we talked about, is really like the first three chapters of Genesis plus three sayings of Christ. Right? And he calls them the sort of triptych, um, which this is the first. All right. And so it's ought to be somewhat familiar. It's from Matthew's gospel. So Pharisees approached him, being Jesus, and tested him, saying, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause, whatever?" He said in reply, "Have you not read that from the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, 'For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh.' So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, no human being must separate." They said to him, "Then why did Moses command that the man give the woman a bill of divorce and dismiss her?" He said to them, "Because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so." Okay, so the first question mostly I have for you, why does why does Jesus, when he's answering this question, why does he go back to the beginning? And then John Paul II do the same thing. Why go back to the beginning?
Because Moses was making,
Hmm?
because Moses was making law for people under original sin, what Jesus was answering the way it should be.
Okay. Um, so yeah, I mean, more or less, that's the answer. But the issue is, right, in order to understand God's plan, right, we have to somehow cross the barrier of sin, right? So what was God's plan? We have to look at what was happening before there was sin, right? And we do that for two reasons, right? We do that first of all to get grasp God's original plan, but also to understand what Christ is offering us, right? So Christ isn't just saying, hey, like just now that I'm here, you just have to try harder. And we're gonna just erase everything Moses did. Like this is an invitation on Christ's part, right? And that's why he says in the beginning, and then he mentions the hardest of hearts, right? Um, so that like technically, like why does Moses do that? Does anyone know why Moses does that?
I think because otherwise the husbands would have killed their
Yeah, they were
wives.
killing their wives, right? Yeah, till death do us part, right? And so, like Moses, in a certain sense, makes a law that keeps them from doing something worse, right? And so this is the sort of the hardness of our heart, right? And so he mentions this to remind us of sin, but then also to for us to grasp that Christ is offering us an expansion of our freedom. And so Christ, like in all of these situations, right? He's returning to the beginning to sort of avoid the whole juridical like argument about divorce. Because he's like, okay, that was never in the plan anyway. Let's not waste our time talking about this. Um, yes.
So I guess there was one thing that kind of like um my question would be how is it that it was uh like the divorce in that case that Moses gives him is like a true legitimate divorce, right? So the actual like thing I'm just trying to consider was the marriage that they had, like the marriage that they had was must have been substantially different than the marriage that we have today. In like it's in the, like in what you're violating, like
Yeah, so I think what he's saying is that like God tolerated it, right? Married the the idea that marriage is indissoluble, like that's baked into marriage, like
Well,
natural
yeah.
law, right? And so I think all he's saying is that God tolerated it so that
Okay.
something worse didn't happen. So marriage in and of itself wasn't necessarily different. It was just they weren't living up to it. Is that what you're asking?
Well, because I'm trying to think, like, if, for example, they divorced their wives, how do we know that they weren't adulterers then, right? They were violating some other part of the law, but being adulterers because, like, they didn't have it. There's no way to actually properly divorce your wife.
Yeah, so in a certain sense, they what was going on was he was lifting the guilt of adultery in those situations, like the personal guilt. So they were objectively still guilty of adultery.
It was like a temporary kind of, like a temporary grace to kind of,
I mean, they were to sort of. I mean, he was essentially removing the precept
yeah.
so
That's what
that
I was gonna, I was like,
yeah.
I didn't want to go into that. But I
Yeah,
was like,
no,
he's like a precept.
he's removing the precept so that they're no longer guilty of adultery.
Yeah,
Um, subjectively speaking,
yeah.
objectively, it's still adultery. They're just not guilty of it.
Because they're in obedience to this law as opposed to.
Yeah. So I am like totally losing the word I'm looking for, but you know how like say you're going on a boat somewhere in the middle of nowhere and you can go to your pastor and he can tell you you don't have to go to mass on Sunday. What is that called when a dispensation?
Yeah.
So it's a dispensation, like there's such thing as a dispensation, right? So he was dispensing them from the guilt attached to you shall not commit adultery.
Yeah, well, so my question's like, because I was talking to that like Protestant guy the other day about like Peter having the ability to bind and loose, but he can't bind and loose things that are contrary to the thing, right? Like
Yeah, so I mean that's a good point. So yes, because where does he get his authority? Like Peter is not the authority.
yeah,
He only gets authority in obedience to Christ.
yeah.
And so
Christ
and
not
who cannot deceive nor
yeah,
who cannot deceive nor be deceived, right?
Yeah.
And so like and that's why like only any exercise of authority in the Petrine office has to be under the obedience of Christ,
mhm.
right? Which is another one of the ways in which we say, okay, like it can't be an authoritative thing if he says something that is like contrary to natural law or something like that.
Yeah. I guess maybe I would have a hard time understanding how a dispensation works that way.
Yeah, so a dispensation just simply says the law does not bind you to be guilty in this situation.
But it is, so is it a kind of, is it a grace or is it a loosening of a law?
It's a loosening. It's
Okay.
so in other words, it's this can't be done in this situation.
Yeah.
So I'm dispensing that obligation on you.
We had this 30 minutes ago.
Yeah. Yes.
Would you say that in recognition of a greater, more fundamental truth or element of the moral law, that you have an obligation that overturns or outweighs another one?
As long as you don't look at that in like a proportionalist kind of way, yes.
Oh.
Parker, what were you gonna ask?
I was just gonna say, could maybe you covered this, but it seems like, Moses is giving this temporary allowance. Could a priest or pastor or bishop do this now?
No. No. Because well, first of all, because Moses, like the chair of Moses was a thing, like the Petron office, right? And because Christ has overturned that sort of way in which things of the natural law could be dispensed. Right, because now under the law of grace, like those things are sort of in a certain sense binding again. Yeah. And possible, yes.
So, I think through most example and polygamy, where does that fit in? Similar to like you can't polygamy divorce is contrary to like what marriage is. So is polygamy.
Divorce is just serial polygamy, right?
Yeah.
That's all it is. Like
So is that really what David is?
again, God
It's-
permits it. Yeah. Yep.
Wait, so the dispensation, I guess like I'm trying to think about it, it's like it would in comparison to confession. Now confession is different in comparison that it's not like a loosening the law of money, right? Like there's a different quality that
No, in fact, like it's the exact opposite,
Yeah.
right? Like this is where your guilt is taken away, not where like I think we've talked about this before, but like a priest doesn't judge your guilt, right? I mean, he can judge your sorrow, but he ought not to judge like, and if you're confessing to a priest that's telling you something's not a sin, like don't go back to that priest, right? Like it's not what confession is for. Um, so yeah, so in that respect, the only judgment is like, oh, is he sorry? Is he a firm purpose amendment?
yeah.
That's it. Okay, so Christ, as you know, is sort of mixing the two creation accounts, right? So when he talks about going back to the beginning, and so this is what John Paul II now does. So he's going to look at both creation accounts, and in looking at them, he's going to sort of try to help us grow in self-knowledge first and foremost. And so the first, when you read Theology of the Body, he will call the first creation account, that is Genesis 1. He will call that the Elohim or the Elohist, which is just the priestly way of referring to God. So you'll notice it in translation, it'll say either God or Lord. Whereas I should say the other way. So it'll say God, and then in the other, it will the Yahwist will usually say Lord. Okay, so God made every kind of wild animal, every kind of tame animal, and every kind of thing that crawls on the ground. God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make human beings in our image after our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the tame animals, all the wild animals, and all the creatures that crawl on the earth. God created mankind in his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. Okay. So a couple of things, right? That just to sort of help us to kind of move into theology of the body. So the first account from John Paul II's reading is what he calls the objective account. So it sort of answers the question, what is man? Right? And the second account will be more of a psychological, subjective account that sort of answers like, who is man? Okay. And so what we get here, right, is one, comparing man in relation to everything else, right? And then the sort of theological explanation that he's made in the image of God. So in the 7-day cycle of creation, a precise graduated procedure is evident. However, man is not created according to a natural succession. The creator seems to halt before calling him into existence, as if he were pondering within himself to make a decision. Let us make man in our image after our likeness, right? So there's this sort of pause, right? Where instead of saying where it says, where he just says, let there be, let there be, let there be, let there be, he has this sort of pause that says, let's do this before doing it. Okay. And he says that obviously has some sort of theological implications, which we'll sort of hash out. And then the second account is what he calls the subjective account. It can be said that it is a profundity that is of a nature particularly subjective and therefore, in a certain sense, psychological. The second chapter of Genesis constitutes, in a certain manner, the most ancient description and record of man's self-knowledge. Together with the third chapter, it is the first testimony of human conscience. Okay, so this, as I said, is the sort of Yahwist account. This is where, Moses in writing Genesis, sort of using that personal name for God. And what it sort of helps us to grasp is this sort of subjective interior. Remember, John Paul II always trying to take some sort of interior experience and map it back to reality. And then sort of to help us explain our own experience, right? And so what he says is essentially what this leads to is 3 different experiences. And these experiences are original solitude, original unity, and original nakedness. All right, so original solitude, original unity, original nakedness. All right, so we'll go through each one of those. Okay, so original solitude. So we'll sort of divide this in half, all right? So there's this essential link between like original man and uh, and our experience now is that that's why he's looking at experience, right? Because in our hearts, we sort of grasp an echo of this, right? And so that's what he's going to sort of start with. Okay, so the affirmation of God Yahweh, it is not good that man should be alone, appears not only in the immediate context of the decision to create woman, I will make him a helper fit for him, but also in the wider context of reasons and circumstances which explain more deeply the meaning of man's original solitude. The Yahweh's text connects the creation of man, first and foremost, with the need to till the ground. Okay, why does he say first and foremost? So in other words, why is that the first thing that sort of God commands him to do? Well, yeah, in the first account he does say that, right? But why in this account is the first thing he sort of says is to till the ground? Yeah, in the subjective account, this is before he was doing.
I mean, he gives, well, I think there's flaws to what I'm gonna say, but like, this is the, at least the temporal end that he's given to, right? This is building ground.
Okay, I mean, I would say yeah, but I would go back then. I'll just kick the can one more thing down the road and say why.
I mean, he's given to like. The Genesis says that he's in charge of all of creation, right? And so it's for him to, order it and like to, take care of it, right? I think that's kind of what building kind of implies.
Yeah. So look at it more in the sense of like what does this lead to in Adam? So look what would it subjectively, this sort of tilling and naming. So let's just start with a simple question. Like how does anyone grow in self-knowledge initially? Reflect on what?
Differences between himself and the things around him.
Yes. So the only way you can grow in self-knowledge initially, right, is to know what you're not, right? Like when we're born, it's a blank slate, right? I don't have any knowledge about myself. I have this interior experience, but it's only in a certain, like you think about even just from like a developmental standpoint, like one of the first things a baby learns is like the difference between it and its mother, right? Like it's like suddenly, oh, like this is my hand, I'm not just an extension of her, right? And so,
Wow, figure out the hand situation.
yeah,
Like, months.
yeah. I mean, it's not an instantaneous thing, right? Yeah.
Great, but it took 3 months of having them before she.
So this is why, by the way, like reality actually is part of our identity because there's a wall there, right? And I need to know what things aren't me, right? And so that's why I spent 10 minutes last week talking about how damaging Descartes is because what is all reality? It's me, right? And so it isn't just that you lose like sight of the world, you also lose sight of yourself.
But is it like man is imaging creation after like his own image, which I like
I mean, some of it, yes. Like he in a certain sense, right? Like he's given a capacity to sort of take and make things in his own image too, right? Like and not in a bad way necessarily.
yeah,
right?
yeah. I guess I'm trying to think like because the naming part that comes from him. That's like Adam naming things implies like a sense of ownership, but also like knowledge of
Yeah, so it's really important. So like in naming things, right?
because he doesn't name it himself. He doesn't name it Adam. He names it something separate from.
Yeah, and in naming them, right? Like to name something, what you already said it, you have to know what it is, right?
Yeah.
So it's not as if he's like I always use the example like Dr. Seuss, right? Like he's not just naming things just willy-nilly, right? He's naming them because he knows what they are, right? And in a certain sense, like tilling is getting down into the dirt and sort of like he is in creation, right? And this, by the way, is like why part of the masculine genius is like our competency, right? Like where it's built, it's baked into us, right? Like
Yeah.
Adam is an expert in creation, right? And so first and foremost, like he needs to look at things, name them, which it implies both knowledge of them, but naming biblically also implies authority, right? And so it's both of those things, but in that he comes to know himself.
Yeah, I think that like I've heard the quote that God is in the details, right? I think it was like an architect said that. So like to me, I'm thinking like man would have been in the details before the fall. But now like the ground, I guess like
Now it's hard.
Yeah,
He's
now
still
it's
man
hard.
is still like,
yeah,
you know,
the ground is
every man is still like fundamentally sort of ordered to the details. That's how we're wired. That's how we're made. And it's how we were supposed to be made, right? Like,
Yeah.
so, yeah, so, okay, so going back now, self-knowledge develops at the same rate as knowledge of the world. This is why he means that, right? Because I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that. Of all the visible creatures, of all the living beings to which man has given a name, to affirm his own dissimilarity with regard to them. In this way, consciousness reveals man as the one who possesses a cognitive faculty as regards the visible world. With this knowledge, which in a certain way brings him out of his own being, man at the same time reveals himself to himself in all the peculiarity. I can't say it even slower, it makes it even worse. Okay, so I mean, here's a question, which I think is worth reflecting on for a second. So, how does Adam know he's different than the animals, though?
I mean, he possesses self-knowledge, right?
Yeah, but I mean, maybe I don't know. Maybe he meets a dog and he thinks that that dog seems to have self-knowledge, so you just can't communicate.
Oh, I see that.
Yeah.
Like he knows that.
Yeah. So, how does he know he's fundamentally different?
Different. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Language?
Oh, last week.
Well, I mean, there's a very simple answer. Yeah.
It's the body, right?
Yeah, the body, right? Like the body is the answer, right? Like he looks at his body and looks at animal's body and they're different, right?
Yeah, and he looks at his fatty.
Yeah. But what is it about? So I think this is worth actually talking about, right? Because I mean, there is like the atheist argument, right? Like that humans are poorly designed, right? I mean, and so how do you respond to that? Right. So what is it specifically about the human body that's different? Right. Well, in order to say something is poorly designed, well, we have to say, okay, we'll flip it. What would be a good human body?
I don't even think that kind of inane foolishness is worth responding.
Well, it is. You know why I think it's worth responding to, because it actually, in a certain sense, it'll help us because what it implies, right, is what they're doing is putting themselves in the place of God, right? Because you can't say what a body is good for until you know what it is for, right? You have to know what it's for in order to say, is it good or bad? And what is the human body for? Primarily.
Work.
What are we made for? To know God, right? To know, yeah, don't overthink it again. Don't overthink it. Like, so in other words, look at the human body and it's made for knowledge, right? Why do we have hands and this the sense of touch that we have, like with opposable thumbs? So we can pick stuff up and actually discover its form. Like, have you like why are all the sense organs in the head? Why are I don't know, why are we upright? Do you know we're the only creatures that our eyes are fixed on the horizon? What's at the horizon? Where heaven and earth meet. Right? So even in our bodies, right, we know we're made for God.
Where are apes' eyes oriented?
So apes are oriented down, right? Like most animals are oriented towards the ground, right?
Yeah,
In their vision. Right. Even when like in a certain sense, I think even like when apes are upright, like they can't stay upright for very long, but they're still like oriented downwards. And so like I agree with you, Josh. That's a totally absurd argument, but I've gotten in this discussion and blown people away by it.
It also comes up in really sneaky ways. Again, like to go back to babies, so many people are like, yeah, babies were born like 3 months early. Which is like a weird thing to have said to you, because it totally dismisses like the bigger picture of okay, maybe, but like if the opportunity for parents still love to just have to like we aren't born 3 months early. Like some are, but like that 9 month sweet spot, like it was intentionally designed. But people say that too all the time around kids. They're like, oh yeah, be born 3 months early. You gotta be real careful. It's like, I don't think that's
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think they should name a fallacy called the "you're not God" fallacy, like because that's what that ultimately is, right? Like they're just, I'm smarter than God fallacy. But so the point is, right, again, like how we know we're not like the animals is in and through our body, right? And then the body expresses the person, right? And the fact that, we literally, our hands are made for tools, like made to make tools and use tools. Um, and so that's part of how Adam figured out he was different from the animals. He's like, yeah, I'm like studying these things, I'm looking in a different direction. I'm able to do things and grab things in a different way. Okay, so yes, self-knowledge is the first piece. Yes.
I was gonna say, I actually had a discussion with someone the other day about how, they'd come to this realization that God had given them, like, the flaws in, like, their body, on purpose, and I think that's accurate, like, that, like, they had figured this out in prayer, and they were quite angry at God for it. And so to me, kind of like, I was talking when I was like, the thing is, like, it doesn't matter how you like even if your body was different, you would still suffer the same kind of like problems, and that like you would still feel like it's not enough or something like that. Like you would always uh struggle with that. So I don't know. Like I think that question of like how do we optimize the human body or something like that is
I mean, I think, yeah, to Josh, I think it's a silly thing because if you're not like things are teleological, right? So you can't
Yeah.
decide like something is bad.
well to me, like I guess the way I was gonna go is like how do we know that like because I mean it is like if it is like a true like it's a defect, right? Like it's a defect in one sense it is bad, but it's also meant for our good,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. So like, yeah. So a defect, like,
Yeah.
that's it's a material evil, right? Like
Yeah.
a lack of a good that should have otherwise been there. Yeah, it's a material evil. Um, but in the end, like only God can bring good from evil, right? And so even in that material evil, like there is some good that the person otherwise wouldn't have received. And
Yeah.
and God chose the most gentle way to give it to him,
Yeah.
right? Whatever it is. And some of that is like being able to discover that, right? So um yeah, okay. All right. So first is that sort of self-knowledge. And then the second aspect is self-determination. Self-determination just means like we get to decide who and sort of what we are going to be. And I'll qualify that in a second. In the second narrative, he is manifested as the subject of the covenant, that is, a subject constituted as a person, constituted in the dimension of partner of the absolute. He must consciously discern and choose between good and evil, between life and death. The words of the first order of God Yahweh speak directly to the submission and dependence of man, the creature on his creator. They directly reveal precisely the level of humanity as subject of the covenant and partner of the absolute. Man is alone. That means that he, through his own humanity, through what he is constituted at the same time in a unique and exclusive, unrepeatable relationship with God. All right, so part of this, right, this solitude, right, is recognizing that not only is he different from the animals, but he's made to be alone with God. Right. And so in a certain sense, this is why God issues the command not to eat from the tree. So, okay, why does God give that command? I'm not looking probably for like a single answer here, but what do
My
you think,
stab
Josh?
at it would be
Go ahead.
my stab at it would be maybe I was thinking about this when you asked like could an animal have eaten from the tree and been fine? So like maybe to separate us from the animals, but I don't think that's it.
I mean, it does separate us from the animals in that way. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know specifically. I don't know, maybe the tree was too high for, I don't like,
No, in
Yeah.
the sense that like it would affect us. It would affect us in a different way than it would affect an animal.
yeah, so like follow that line of thought all the way through and I think you have the answer. Why is it different for us than for the animals?
Because we're morally culpable for disobedience.
Because we have,
I mean, we have a will.
so we have freedom, right?
Yeah.
And, what were you gonna say, Nick? Yes. So, I mean, like the knowledge and the will, right? That's why it's sort of tied to the knowledge of good and evil, right? But what it's sort of getting at is what the tree sort of represents is a temptation or a test to decide whether we're going to be what we want to be or what God wants us to be. Right?
This is why Jesus says it's not what you eat that defiles you, but what comes out, right? So it's the disobedience out of eating that.
Yes.
Actually.
Well, yeah, the disobedience that was already there, in a certain sense, already there, right? Prior to eating it, right? So this idea of self-determination, right? And I think we've talked about this before. Because I think this experience is not unique to Adam, right? In the sense of, in the sense that, we all have the power to decide what we're going to be, right? And not in the sense of like, hey, you can be whatever you want to be, like you can be president someday, in the sense of like what we do affects what we become, right? So I repeatedly lie, I become a liar. I repeatedly steal, I become a thief, right? I repeatedly, do courageous things, I become courageous, right? So in a certain sense, this self-determination. So in essence, like what the tree sort of represents is, like, are you going to be what you were created to be, or are you going to just define your own sort of act of creation?
At the end though, it says there's an unrepeatable relationship with God Himself.
Yeah. So what are you going with there?
Well, I guess you just mentioned that we grow in that sort of thing. Like we have the capacity for growth unlike angels, right? Like we can tell truth continually. We'll be a truthful person. If we lie continually, we'll become a liar.
Yeah, so I think what he's getting at there is that we don't follow like a script,
Yeah.
right? So this is why like the comparison game often doesn't help us, right?
Mm.
We don't follow a script because we have this unique and unrepeatable relationship with God. God made us for a singular purpose, right? And in a certain sense, we can cooperate with that or not. We can become what He made us to be,
Yeah.
or not.
I think I got it. Like it's the unique, exclusive, and unrepeatable relationship with Him is the fact that God, in time, made us. Yeah, like in time, He made us, as like a creature set apart, right? But also a partner of the absolute. And He doesn't change His mind. He doesn't have that quality of like saying like,
Yeah,
oh, I'm going to continue to be true. That will make sense. He's already true.
Yes.
He can't be made true. He
Yes.
is true.
yes, yes. And then so what were we gonna say, Josh?
On the
Then you go back.
never mind.
Okay.
I did have a question.
Okay.
Before we get too far away from it, we talked about naming animals and whatnot. Obviously, angels, we don't have their name for a reason. Adam's not interact with them, at least not that we see. I don't really know what my question is other than I just always found that very odd.
Yeah, so I mean, in a certain sense, it's a matter of authority, right? Because a name implies authority.
Right.
So, like the example I always use is, you're in a restaurant, how do you sort of have an authority over the waitress with her name, right? You're like, hey, Sally Mae, come get my plate or whatever, right? That you don't necessarily have if you don't have her name, right? And so biblically speaking, it's always about authority. And the other thing too is that, in a certain sense, biblically speaking, like to call a name is to make the person present, right? And so that's essentially why, we don't, like when Jacob, like he won't tell Jacob his name because it's like you can't have authority over me, right? Which also like gives you the sort of the capacity to act in their name as well, right? So like when God gives His name to Moses, he now has power to act in God's name, right? All of us have the power to act in Jesus's name.
Oh,
So, so it's a a very authoritative type thing. But it is also to sort of mark that clear distinction.
They use this dominion, which kind of combines the authority and the knowledge.
Yes.
Adam says dominion over.
Okay, so the third sort of aspect of this original solitude is what John Paul II calls original loneliness. Listening to the words of God Yahweh, man should have understood that the tree of knowledge had roots not only in the Garden of Eden, but also in his humanity. He should have understood, furthermore, that this mysterious tree concealed within it a dimension of loneliness, hitherto unknown, with which the Creator had endowed him in the midst of the world of living beings, to which he, man, in the presence of the Creator himself, had given names in order to understand that none of them was similar to him. Okay, so what he's talking about here, maybe you can grasp what he's saying. So, did Adam understand what it meant when God said, if he eats from the tree, he'll die? What do you guys think?
Well, he had nothing to compare it to. He hadn't experienced it, right? So
Okay.
he could've-
Yeah, so I think that part I think is true. I think in a certain sense, there's no experiential sort of connection with death, which is why I think God has to tell him, right? But what does God mean when he says that? Because in a certain sense, right, like the serpent says, you won't die, and does Adam just keel over?
I mean, it'll be something he doesn't know. I don't know that like God, maybe in my mind at least, it's like God is telling him this is like a thing that you will not like I'm not gonna tell you, but you won't know what it does. Like it's not good and you don't know. He doesn't have full knowledge of the consequences of it.
So Adam could, so naturally, right, like human beings are meant to die, like we're material creatures, and so technically speaking, that would be like his Adam's immortality was a preternatural gift. Sort of given to him very specifically, right? And with that, obviously, would come the temptation to think this is just how I am, right? That I can't die, right? And so there becomes this sort of uh, you know, this test of his sort of like dependence on God, right? Does he truly recognize that he's dependent on God? But what Adam couldn't experience and wouldn't understand, and this is where I think God is telling him about death, is he has no idea what it would be like to be cut off from God. Right? And that's loneliness. Right. So solitude, this is the difference between solitude and loneliness, right? Like a monk can go off in the desert and he can be alone, but not lonely. Right. A hardened criminal goes into solitary confinement and he is completely and totally lonely. Right. And so in a certain sense, right, there is this pull from the fall towards loneliness, right? And if you think about this, if you want to know one thing that plagues our culture more than anything else, it is loneliness. I guarantee you, you all know plenty of people who are lonely, right? And maybe they even have friends, right? And the point is, you will always end up lonely without God, right? That's just the fact of the matter is, in fact, like this is pretty much Mother Teresa's whole spiel about poverty, right? Was not necessarily about the fact that people didn't have a lot of stuff. Like her whole spiel was that the greatest poverty is loneliness, right? And so what did she try to? She tried to bring Christ to people, right? And so this idea of loneliness, which is endemic in our culture, is because we've lost God. And that is at sort of the heart of what John Paul II is getting at as experience in a fallen world is without God, you will be lonely. All right. Any questions on original solitude? Yes.
I guess like the first one, and you can maybe tell me if I'm correct in it, but the Adam, like one of the things that he's desiring is to seize like the knowledge for himself that wasn't given to him, right? Would that be a correct read? So at least using this knowledge. Like the other thing I want to ask is, could God I'm thinking about it especially like because Augustine talks about how like sin in itself as like a thing is inconceivable. So how could like Adam could not have conceived the sin in his mind because it's so like it's nothingness is like a mystery in itself. But my kind of thing is, how could God construct uh I guess he didn't construct a thing that was evil in itself, but it was a choice. There was a choice in it that was evil, right? Like that. So God didn't actually construct evil in that case. He constructed a possibility of choices which are both like they're all of them are
Yeah,
good
the
themselves.
tree in and of itself wasn't evil.
Yeah,
But what was evil was the act
yeah,
of going beyond his limitation. Like he put a limit on Adam, right? Like ultimately, like what the tree is at least supposed to symbolize, not saying it's not a real tree, but what it's supposed to symbolize is you have a limitation,
yeah.
right? And that's a limitation. Don't like you can go anywhere you want with your freedom. Don't cross that line.
And
right?
that's why Adam is fully culpable for that sin, and God is not, right? Because
Yeah.
He didn't like even this in the scenario. In this scenario, he could have chosen good because he has a true free will.
Yeah, I mean, especially in that scenario, right? Like even in the fact that there is something like coercion, right? Like that doesn't even like because the devil threatens him, right? Like
Yeah.
and you know, in the you shall not die, there's an implicit threat, right? Like
Yeah.
I'll kill you if you don't do this, right?
Yeah,
But even that Adam had an antidote to with the tree of life.
yeah,
Right. So the minute he's tempted to that, he should have ran the other way to the tree of life.
yeah,
Right. And so even in that regard, like, you know, there's a certain amount of like God just placing that limitation there for that very purpose.
yeah. I guess one of the ways to take it would be the fact that like Adam didn't know how to respond to the suffering in that moment.
Well, so the other piece of that sort of answers your question, right? That it seems to be inherent, like your question about to your friend, right?
Yeah.
It seems to be inherent that we have to be reminded of our limitations,
Yeah,
right? And that's, you know, either it's baked in like that, like it's there, or
yeah,
it's baked into us sort of automatically, right? And that actually, in a lot of ways, like if you think about it, and it's hard, like as you know, I can tell you, like not to play the old man card, but as you get older, like there's a grace in realizing how limited you are.
yeah. Like you're not a good steward of your own salvation.
Yeah, and I mean that's good. It is a good thing for me to know that I have limitations.
Yeah,
And so like the fact that God does that is important. You know,
yeah,
even though it's not perceived that way initially, because you know, initially we have to get over the suspicion of God.
and I guess you could take that with the fact that that's why becoming like a child is so important because children have limited knowledge.
Yep.
And
Yep.
they embrace the limitations.
Yeah. Yeah. In a lot of ways, like children aren't gonna, they're just gonna accept, you know, like a child with a disability. Normally they don't go, why did you do this to me, God?
Yeah,
Right. Like normally that comes later on.
yeah.
Like a little bit of like jadedness, right? Like they just sort of like they just
Like,
accept.
yeah, they lost something. They feel a loss for
Yeah.
something that they should have had when in the first place it wasn't theirs.
Right. What were you gonna say, Josh?
Why didn't God just like make the tree a couple feet taller?
Well, it's okay, right? I don't like, well, in a certain regard, like, I think, right? I think he wants it in the, like, in Adam's reach, right? For it to be impossible in a certain sense, like, then it doesn't serve its purpose of limit. Like, Adam just goes, oh, my limitation is not like, you know, my limitation is that I don't, you know, I can't reach it, right? Not in my limitation is God said, don't do that, right?
I think God gives the capacity for him to act out his freedom.
Yeah, and like he would have built a ladder, right? He would have built the Tower of Babel. He would have like it. It's just
You would have this, it would have had this much more than fallen. So
yeah. So, but it's a free act though, right? Like
Also, I mean, even if the tree was a couple feet taller, the fact that he could have just tried jumping to reach it, that would have been like an act of disobedience.
yeah, I mean, he could have climbed the tree. The point, right, is like not that it was easy to get to. The point was that he disobeyed God.
Yeah. Remember, this is what confused me when I was trying to learn about.
I kind of feel like, in all honesty, like after I just chastise other people, if I'm God, I make it as easy as possible for him to get to the tree. Because like I want him to be able to like either obey or not. right? And like, I will just say there's plenty of times as a parent where I've made it like super clear I didn't want my kids to do something, but then I made it super easy for them to do it if they didn't want to listen to me because I felt like it was a good thing for them to learn. So I think either way, it would like it in a certain sense wouldn't have mattered. Um,
It's not just a conversation.
yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
So it's not just a conversation of like, so you not like, so you can do that like humility thing. But like the choice is necessary for life to exist. Like that's why God wants him to obey or not to obey. That's why it's not, let's make it this huge difficult feat. It's just like if love requires a choice. If there is no alternative, if there is no potential to disobey God, then there's also no potential for Adam and Eve to love God and to choose God. There's just no options. If I lock Catherine in this room, she's not staying here because she wants to. I'm staying here because all the doors are closed. Can't reach the candle yet. Right? That's better.
Yeah, but in the eschaton, nobody gets the capacity to sin. So the question was more so asking why wouldn't he create things in the state of the eschaton?
Yeah, and I think it's because it's because in flipping it, the reason in the eschaton is because there's no question as to what the good is. Right. So in other words, like your will is always oriented to the good, right? And so like you can't choose evil for its own sake, right?
Well, doesn't Augustine argue that all choosing evil for its own sake?
I don't think so.
No, I think
Yeah.
he identifies it with the fact that it's always a misperceived good.
Yeah. Like I think that
That's not like what the notion of that. When I was reading Augustine one time, he was talking about his own sinfulness and when he was living.
oh, so you're talking about in the Confessions where he talks about stealing the pear, right? Yeah, but he's talking about how he just wanted the pleasure, which was the good, of stealing it. He didn't care that it tasted good or so he was just saying that he like I mean it was very much a sort of Adam moment, right? Where he's just doing it for the pleasure of disobeying. So he's choosing the pleasure of disobeying.
He's also trying to show the fact that sin is like pointless, right? Like that there isn't a coherence to sin, but he chose it as like kind of a thing for himself, right? I mean, I don't know. He does a lot of things. And like he's even showing his own concupiscence, right? Like part of it, the section where he's talking about babies like being greedy for the other nurse's milk, right? Like for the nurse's milk, like they're not thinking about the other baby. I mean that's him trying to kind of drive the point home that concupiscence is real because he's also arguing against the.
Yeah, I don't think he's saying he chose evil for evil's sake.
Yeah.
I think he's saying he chose evil because he found some pleasure in it. Parker, were you gonna say something?
That if you think that it might be a good thing, or at least it's gonna God's idea that you would have the choice, then choice would be obvious, like good. I understand it's like the Catholic Church position that things like abortion and pornography would be outlawed, kind of taking away sort of the choice, for like setting out. Is that just because of original sin and our like concupiscence, or?
Well, I mean, the question is like, do even in a unfallen state, do we need laws, right? Which is, I think, what you're really asking. And clearly we did, right? Like because there was a law not to eat from the tree, right? And so yeah, so I don't think it's like
But it's not about the law, because we still have like moral law, right? Which is like, don't do this, but it's like God didn't like, also put like a wall around the tree. We couldn't get to it. Whereas we do kind of do that with other like sins.
Well, yes and no. So like we talk about, and this comes up way later on theology of the body, but we can talk about it now. But so what is the idea of like where Saint Paul talks about like freedom from the law, right? And what he means by that is that the law doesn't feel like an imposition, right? So those things for certain people, like you shall not commit abortion. That feels like an imposition from the outside, right? But for other people, it's like, well, I don't need that law because I would never do that, right? And so like, within this sort of scope, right, is where we get to the point where we don't need the law only because we already desire what the good thing is, right? So in other words, like, I don't need to tell you, like, Parker, there's a law in this room not to pull the chair out from under Prem, right? Because you have no desire to do that. Like maybe you do, I don't know. But you're like, I don't need that law. Why would I pull the chair out from under him, right? And so that's the idea is that you get freedom from the law, as you grow in virtue and grace, so that it's not an imposition. But if you're not there yet, it does feel like it is totally an imposition, right? But the only way to get there is through. So you sort of have to go through, and you initially need the law, right, in order to make that happen.
Would it be like the fact that, yeah, the virtue is like the law, we have freedom from the law because we can freely choose virtue?
Yeah, you're only free from the law insofar as it's not an imposition on you. Like you don't need it.
Would it be, I'm trying to think, like, I'm thinking about it in the sense that, like, we have precepts, right? Like, we have precepts, like those, the point in removing a precept would just simply be that we can choose the intention of that precept freely. But the point of the precept is just as a normative rule, so that we as a kind of assistance, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's why the law was kind of the steward of virtue and wisdom. But because we have Christ himself and his grace to the Holy Spirit, the normative rules are no longer just it's not
They're not binding from the outside. They
Yeah.
ought to be binding from the inside.
yeah. So it's like you
And now we have the power for it to be binding inside.
yeah, like the door is not locked. It's not like the door is locked from the outside. Like we just don't open
Yes.
the door.
Yes. All right. So now moving towards the creation of woman. The words of Genesis 2:23 speak of it directly, that is the creation of woman, for the first time in the following terms: flesh of my flesh and bone of my bones. The male man, I always said, a piece always gets me, uttered these words as if it were only at the sight of the woman that he was able to identify and call by name what makes them visibly similar to each other, and at the same time what manifests humanity. In light of the preceding analysis of all the bodies which man has come into contact with, and which he has defined conceptually, giving them their name, the expression "flesh of my flesh" takes on precisely this meaning. The body reveals man. Okay, so what he's sort of driving at here is how, when Adam sees Eve, does he know she's a person? Her body, that is the end, but let's go deeper now.
Because she's dissimilar to everything else like he is.
So she is dissimilar, but she's kind of dissimilar to him too, though, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's
So-
a complement of. She's a
So,
complement of his.
yeah, so there is a complementarity there, but there's an even sort of more profound,
And there's also a fulfillment of his body in hers, right? Like.
yeah, which is all tied to the complementarity, right? So to sort of let the cat out of the bag, the way she's different is he sees her and knows she's in the image of God. Nothing else is in the image of God, right? So he can look at her, and yes, all of those things about complementarity are true, but they're secondary. What he does is look at her and sees that she is in the image of God, just like him, right? So he knows I'm in the image of God, and now he looks at her, and she also is in the image of God.
That would be their shared humanity, is the fact that they're in the image of God.
Yes, yes. And by the way, what that actually sort of encompasses is that is what purity is, by the way. When you can look at another person first and foremost and grasp that they are in the image of God, right? Because from there on, there's no use. There's no, when you recognize that one piece, that's how it manifests, right? And so it's not just that he has, they're the only two people on earth and he has this just desire for her. That's there, but it's there primarily because he has found someone who is also in the image of God. All right. And so it's really important to understand that is the sort of, again, the basis of their unity is that they're made in the image of God, right? So in a certain sense, again, there's this trinity of sorts between Adam, Eve, and God, right? There's a third that is sort of always present in their relationship to each other and always present when they first encounter each other. All right. And so that's how he understands she's a person. All right. Sort of moving on, creation of woman, and this just because it's me and I will take a jab at anything that puts a chink in the armor of evolution. But I will explain it from a sort of theological reasoning. So there are in we've talked about this before about sort of the principles of reading scripture. You should always read it literally until there's a good reason not to. Okay. And for the most part in Genesis, there's not a good reason not to, but in one particular place, there's a really good reason not to. And that is when it comes to the creation of Eve. It is a dogma of the church that Eve was created from the side of Adam. Okay. It is definitive. And there's a definitive statement on the board. We record that what is to all known and cannot be doubted by any. All is to all known and cannot be doubted by any definitive statement made by the Pope on faith and morals, that God on the sixth day of creation, having made man from the slime of the earth, and having breathed into him his face, the breath of God, gave his companion, whom he miraculously took from the side of Adam when he was locked in sleep. God thus, in his most far-reaching foresight, decreed that this husband and wife should be natural beginning of the human race, from whom it might be propagated and preserved by an unfailing fruitfulness throughout all futurity of time.
Don't you know though that slime obviously means he evolved from?
Yeah, because yeah, you're made from dust, and the dust you'll return. You're made from ape, and to ape you will return, right? So we have to believe that Eve came from the side of Adam. But what I want to, I'm kidding, sort of tongue in cheek about taking the jab at evolution, although I've never not taken an opportunity. The reason why I think this is important is that, first of all, why not? Why does it come from the side of Adam? Why not the head or the feet?
I think that the Hebrew kind of indicates that it's like it's from his side because of like her co-equal nature with us.
Yeah. So like under his heart and from like the middle of him. So feet would be him having authority over her. His head would have her having authority over him, right? But there's another reason why this is really important, all right? And it's revealed if you read in Genesis. There's a really kind of mysterious passage, right? It talks about when man, he puts man into this deep sleep, and then the man awakes and he says, this finally is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, shall be called woman. And then it says, therefore, a man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh. Does anyone think that's just randomly thrown in there?
Yeah. Father and mother's dad. Such God.
Yeah, like, so why is that thrown in there randomly?
I mean, well, that's the end to which, like God knowing the whole story of creation or like salvation beforehand, right? He knows what it's for.
Well, no, but clearly he's talking about very specifically this creation of Eve and this wedding.
Moses is writing it, so I'm trying to think. That probably makes sense somehow.
Yeah, so like I'll give you a hint. You can jump ahead to Ephesians 5, where St. Paul actually explains it. What that refers to is the wedding between Christ and the church. When is the church born? Out of the side of the sleeping Christ. The blood and water which flowed out of the side of the sleeping Christ, right? So if you deny this literally happened, right, you lose that typology. And so then you're free to then deny that blood and water really flowed out of the side of Christ, that his church, his bride, was not born from his side. Right. And so this is why it's important, right? And it's important to understand and read scripture correctly. And why this random thing that seems like, okay, fine, like therefore that's why. But no one asked, right? Like nobody asked, like, why do they do this? He tells them anyway, and he tells them because even if in the sense of like Moses doesn't know what he's actually prophesying, he's still saying this is because the son will leave his father in heaven, wed himself to the bride that came out of his side while he's in a deep sleep. And this primordial sacrament will always point to that reality. All right, does that make sense?
I guess like we just have to admit the fact that mother is part of it as well.
Yeah, it's because that's the analogy, right? That's the analogy. And then like in Ephesians 5, like St. Paul, like still uses the analogy but explains it, right? It refers to Christ and his church.
Still leaves his mother, like Mary's there watching.
Yes.
It happen. So it's not even like, well,
Yeah.
parents come in pairs. Bad. This is less theologically.
Yeah, jump in.
Than the growth of the church. But just related to the rib and the positioning, one of the other things is like when you get into a fight, if you've ever been in a fight, I have not. Like in case that anyone got it.
I feel like I don't know if I can believe that or not.
I've not physically gotten into a fight. Like what do? You're gonna protect your rib cage, right? Like your ribs are there. Why? What are your ribs doing? I'm not gonna keep asking questions. So your ribs will protect your organs. They protect your heart. They protect your lungs. You don't go like, hey, like come at my ribs, so it's fine. I've got. It's like you're going to protect your ribs. And think about it. Even if someone jump scares you, you kind of close in, right? You're like, what was that? Right. And so likewise, a woman coming from man's side, coming from his rib. Men are like it's this image of men are meant to protect women. It's not just like the equality, but also there's a component that men are called to actually care for and protect women. That also is.
As somebody who's gotten his ass kicked multiple times, I'm not sure I agree with the.
Yeah, I would protect I would protect the face too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree you should protect your ribs. I'm not disputing that. Yeah. Yeah.
Talk of ribs to the cage. You're not
Yeah.
like my ribs have this, it's fine.
Well, I mean, yeah, you would do that with any part. I don't know if it follows like. I think I agree with you, but I don't know if it follows on the.
It's not. I don't think fighting advice. I'm just giving a point.
Don't worry, we weren't taking fighting advice.
Like I'm just saying, I don't know if it follows from like the text. Although I agree with you.
Okay, so this is the original Unity. I think this slide is long. We don't necessarily have to go over it, but it essentially is everything we just talked about. And why, essentially we can talk about theology of the body because the body reveals the person and the body reveals not just that the person is made for communion with another person, but ultimately communion with God, right? The fact that he sees the image of God in her points to he is meant for communion with God, right? And so in that way, it's also sort of this idea of original unity. Yes.
How does he? I mean, the only way he's capable of knowing that she has the image of God is by his senses, right? So I guess how would he know besides like interacting with her, right?
That is the mystery, right? Because like I can't tell you how that is, how he knew, because I struggle every single day that everyone I encounter, I have to tell myself that they're made in the image of God. I don't see it. So that he saw it was something of the sort of preternatural condition that.
Oh yeah, like, what flesh and blood is not revealed to you, my Father in heaven.
Yeah, so like this, in a certain sense, right? The only way, like, this is where it's a little odd, right? That, the only sort of dogmatic truth that we know is that like man is made in the image of God, right? Like, and so I have to be told that in a certain respect now. Adam didn't need to be told that.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Also, to go back to Adam naming the creatures, one of the other things that reveals is that Adam can look at a thing and like know the thing, like know the essence of a thing. So he's given this track record. That's part of why it's important. Like it's layers on layers on layers for like the first 3 chapters. And so it's not just a minion, but it's Adam showing he can see something and like know the essence of a thing. So it's not just like I think tiger would be a fun bird for like a furry thing with stripes and a long tail. There's something about it that he like knows what a thing is. So by the time he sees Eve, he makes this declaration. Like he's a minimum bit show he can do that already.
I mean,
Somewhere.
I guess he would only know those things, like, he doesn't know it because he has necessarily the eyes that God has in his original.
Yeah, so some of this is like there's not necessarily a dogmatic. There's certainly an opinion that Adam actually had infused knowledge from God,
Yeah,
right? So he didn't have to necessarily learn the way we did. So that could have been part of his infused knowledge. Although I don't think that's a dogmatic teaching of the church. I think that's just a theological opinion.
yeah, like I would think that the way he knew that the woman was, and I'm sure we'll get to it later why the woman was renamed Eve, right? But the woman is made in the image of God partly because of, like, we wouldn't need, like, it's weird to say that it's a prayer that he learns it through, but like he is constantly praying and like the way that he looks at his being.
Yeah, and whatever it means, like, the fact that God walks in the garden with him.
Yeah.
He has a different encounter with God than than we do in a certain
Yeah.
respect. So
Like he's capable of praying without ceasing in I guess like the full sense of what it means for man. And he gives it up in pursuit of like a knowledge that he doesn't have. Kind of like Nikita Kia.
what were we gonna say, Josh?
Would you agree that we have infused knowledge in the sense of receiving transcendentals? Like, we know that there's a unified truth and we have access to the laws of logic and categories of space.
So are you asking? I think more you're asking like, do we have like are we really blank slates or do we have like first principles? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, kind of asking how much do you align with Kantian physics, basically?
I think I don't know, I have to think about this more. I think I think it's truly a blank slate. So I think we discover the laws of like non-contradiction, right? We quickly discover them.
You think we empirically learn?
I think so. I think so. I think that's what I was saying earlier. Like I think like Catherine very quickly learned the law of non-contradiction when she learned the difference between her and Ryan.
She has to keep working.
Right. So I think you can get those principles from experience. So I don't even know it's an important question because I think you can get those first principles very quickly from experience, from just absorbing reality.
I don't know if
That's why I've never really thought of it.
Our reality, this principle, see it through the lens of
I'd have to think about it. I've never really thought about it for the reason that I just kind of assume that it's baked into reality, so you grasp it anyway.
Josh, we talked about it last year during that summer mystic thing. That's what I remember. Like, I think because I had a similar position.
Yeah, I think you can. I mean, I really probably would have to think about it. I think you can grasp those first principles. If I'm wrong, then I would say that we have those first principles, but and that would be all we start with.
So nurture over nutrition.
I mean, in a certain sense, like, yeah, by nature, I would say we don't have any knowledge. Yeah, we just have the capacity. Yeah, just the capacity. Okay, so from original unity, we got original nakedness. Does that mean that to begin with, they did not know that they were naked or that they did not see the nakedness of each other's bodies? A comparative analysis of Genesis 2:25, Genesis 3 leads necessarily to the conclusion that it is not a question here of passing from not knowing to knowing. Rather, it involves a radical change in the meaning of the original nakedness of the woman for the man and of the man before the woman. All right, so his question is when Genesis says they did not know they were naked. Okay, what does that mean? Right? Were they unaware? Were they indifferent? Or what?
I think they were aware. I think the way I would think about it, at least especially based on this, actually presented.
I would say they were unaware of the implications of being naked.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many of you agree with Josh?
They were unaware of the implications.
I personally agree. Yeah. So the meaning of being naked changed, right? What did I say? Like when Eve was naked, what did it reveal?
In terms of perfection, right?
the image of God, right? With the fall, what happens? You ask that question that I can't answer, right? Now naked means something different, right? And because now either maybe, I don't know, the human body, like part of the fall is, and in a certain sense, like the mirror got dirty. Maybe it's in the eye of the beholder. I can't see it. Maybe it's both. But grasping that the meaning of nakedness now changes, right?
Would it be like a corruption of understanding?
I wouldn't say it's like I think there is some sort of shift in reality. It's not I don't think it's an
Oh,
understanding.
so it's not the mirror, the lens becomes opaque. It's like you go from like seeing to not seeing.
Yeah, there's a shift somehow, right? Right, and so why this matters, right? Is sort of mapped to our experience now, like why do we call our private parts our private parts?
Because you don't share them with everybody.
Yeah, there's that, but why don't you share them with everybody?
And they can be used.
Well, not just because they can be abused, like, but there's more to it than that. That is part of it. Because we call them privates because they're what? Like,
Yeah, I mean, we keep them to ourselves. Right?
Yeah.
We don't share.
but what were you gonna say something?
I don't know if it's right, I was just gonna say because you only share with one other person.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the reason, right? Because, and this is where that idea of like biblical knowledge comes from, right? Where like Adam knew his wife, right? Because in a certain sense, like it reveals more of the person than they want to reveal, right? It reveals more of the person than they want, right? So this sort of tells us something about our humanity, right? There's this comfort level. Eve was totally comfortable about being known by Adam, right? And then something happens and she's not so comfortable anymore, right? Because now she's not known as this co-image of God, she's known as something else. Right? And she's known that way very specifically in those body parts, and she doesn't want to show them for that reason. Ryan, were you gonna say something?
I'm stumped because they did not know that they were naked. I've never seen that translation. It's always I was just checking. Like the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. Not that they didn't.
Yeah, so he uses yeah, I don't know which translation of the Bible he uses.
But I'm not like because the explanation that I've always heard was they were naked. They did not feel ashamed, right? Because of all we were saying with the original unity, because before it could keep a sense, original innocence. There's no okay. Like that's the explanation that I'm used to. Like they were not ashamed, but they were naked, and they knew they were naked. There was just no need to be scared of naked.
You say they didn't know they were naked in the sense that they didn't have a conception of what naked was, because they didn't have.
No, I'm confused about the. I'm just curious about
Just where John Paul II got the
yeah. Josh, I've been studying like Genesis 2:1, 2, and 3 like in depth for years, which is why.
and you never caught that.
I've never. I just checked.
Yeah, I don't know where like go back to that date and see where he's quoting from.
Yeah.
Drew has it.
Was that a question to me?
No. It was not to you. I just realized you were looking in the book.
I do.
Yeah.
I was trying to find the Bible, see if they have any citation that would.
When you don't see the Bible 12.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I will say I think I pulled the quotes off of the Vatican website, which I think is different than that.
I think figure it out. 79, yeah.
You're saying that your question was that they.
Well, she just never caught that before, or it's not in the.
The translations I've read. That's my confusion. Like I've combed through Genesis to.
It's audience 11.
And so.
Okay. Is it like you're saying that you never seen the use of the word naked or the?
No, that they did not know.
Oh, that they
Yes,
did not
and
know.
the explanation I've heard and seen and studied for years has been that they knew they were naked, but they didn't feel shame.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Point. Like it wasn't a surprise. They didn't go, "Oh my goodness, you don't have any clothes on." Like they knew that. It meant something different.
Yeah. So for John Paul II, means that the meaning of nakedness changes.
Yeah.
I have a chapter after the eating of the
Yeah, they're asking.
they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves aprons. So that's in chapter 3:7.
Well, so then, yeah, that would imply that they did not know they were
They
naked.
did not know. It's like you would.
So either way, it's an implication from 3, right?
Yeah.
From 3, what it was that, like 3:10 or 3:9?
Would you say your translation was that you're used to?
And I was just looking online again to make sure I wasn't going crazy.
Okay, yeah.
But it's, and the man and his wife were both naked, and they were not ashamed for it, and they felt no shame. Is another.
It's that translation that's weird, because that's what I have here in so many words with that.
Okay.
So this is not the translation, just a different translation. This is the better one. This is the one I will read, but the Vatican one might be the older translation that wasn't very good at the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm confused now.
Yeah.
I've been doing this for years.
I was a little confused.
Yeah, so either way, like the point is still, I mean, his point is still fine. He just took, if it's not in there directly, he just took Genesis 3 and flipped it around, right?
Yeah. 2:25 states that they were naked, but it doesn't state the knowledge of it.
Yeah, and then later says they knew
They knew.
to imply that they didn't know before.
My understanding was concupiscence gets in the way of the knowledge. Like I have the ability to see, but with concupiscence, I can't see properly without first having the initial reaction of sin. And because I have that reaction, I know that the other person also has that inclination. Therefore, I want to cover myself in order to not be used.
Yeah, I think what he's saying is, I think that's true what you just said. I think what he's saying is actually deeper though. I think what he's saying is something fundamentally changed.
Yeah.
Not just the interior sort of experience of it. Something else changed. Right. And that sort of makes sense in a certain sense. Like the condition of them losing sanctifying grace did something to them, right? Like they literally fell and it left. It wasn't just sanctifying grace scooted out and then they're just the same as they were. Like something fundamentally changed about them. So I think what you're saying is true, but I think it's deeper than that too.
Yeah, it could also just be something that like within the Hebrew text like that we're just not able to see and right like when the English makes things so much out.
What were you gonna say?
I was gonna ask, so, because you're saying something fundamentally changed, so does that then mean like, they went from, like you said, he saw her as the image of God, he went seeing the image of God, to seeing it like, for lack of a better word, seeing shame, is that kind of?
Yeah, seeing like maybe the better way to look at it is like he now sees her as an object in the world.
Just the first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that becomes like our sort of default right now. That's the first thing we do. Yeah. Yep. All right. I think we already talked about this. About when we talked about the sort of metaphysical analysis of shame. We're talking love and responsibility. So the reason they didn't feel shame, right, is because they personally are fully in the image and likeness of God. They know that that's what's radiating out of them and that's how they're being seen, right? So they're being seen and known for who and what they really are, right? And then I think we talked about the whole experience of shame. The flip side of it, right, is it's a response, and in a lot of ways, a good response to protection against being used. More of a vocabulary sort of term, yes.
When you say shame, I remember reading, I think in Sirach, it's talking, I think Sirach, like, I just read it was like chapter 5 or something. It talks about a shame that like brings hatred or sin, and there's a shame that brings humility. That would be the kind that brings that'd be the kind of shame that is a sin, right? As opposed to.
You mean the shame they experience?
Yeah, right.
I would say not necessarily, right? Like they experience shame in a protective manner, right? Like in the sense of like Eve did not want to be looked upon as an object, right? And that sort of repulsion of that is experienced as shame, right? Which is why, like, even now, right? Like, we experience shame when most of the time when we're afraid of being treated like an object, or like even deeper, right? You can be ashamed you know, you could get up in front of a room full of people and I could tell, like, you could be talking to someone and I could tell them something really private about you, right? And you would feel shame, right? Because ultimately, that is our sort of interior defense against too much of us being revealed.
Yeah, because so Sirach chapter 4, 21 says, for there's a shame which brings sin, and there's a shame which is glory and favor. Or in the verse before it. So observe the right time and beware of evil, do not bring shame on yourself. Observe the right time and beware of evil, do not bring shame on yourself, for there's a shame which brings sin, and there's a shame which is glory and favor. I know this section is translated. This translation for Sirach is not as standard as the other books.
Right. Yeah, I would say just in general, like there is a negative component to shame. There is you know, in a certain sense, like it's sort of tied up in the passion of fear, and all of that sort of wrapped around. So I don't think there's anything sort of contradictory there. I think it's just what he's trying to do is John Paul II is trying to do is get at like why we experience shame.
Yeah, I guess I was just trying to get like to the character of what that shame is. Like to me, I would think that shame is.
Well, I mean, does it not experientially like resonate with you? Like, have you ever been in a situation where you were shamed?
Yeah. So I'm guessing it's with regards to sin. Like they feel shame for their sin.
Yeah, but it can also just be shame because like somebody told something. Like,
oh, I see.
More of you was revealed than you wanted to reveal,
yeah.
right? Like I think about it all like.
Yeah.
Even if it's like sometimes complimentary, right? Like, you know, I do something nice for someone and it was just meant to be between, you know, me and them. And they go tell everybody like in a big room full of people.
Yeah.
And I experience shame because they've just revealed something of my person. Yeah. You know, because you know, I look at that as like sort of it's an interior of me that's been, you know, exposed that I never wanted to be exposed.
Private.
Yeah, so it's not even just, it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical thing. It can just be like it's a protection of our interiority.
Yeah.
And we get to decide how much we're going to reveal. Right?
So I guess it's sort of like genuine want to be seen as who we are by people comes from.
100%.
Because like we all are afraid that we're gonna like why do we kill what people think so much?
Yeah.
And it's because we're afraid that people are gonna think not true things about us. Like you said, people are gonna reveal things about us that whether it's good or bad, it's very personal. And so it's like the fear of being truly seen in a good or bad way.
Yeah.
It's like a dual thing.
Yeah. So like you're trying to hide what's it sort of and in a good way, sometimes in what's inside of you, right?
Yeah.
And you only want to reveal it in certain circumstances.
But I guess that's why like the cross is first of this, right? Or like I mean, because in the Roman crucifixion, like they made you naked, right? Like you're not like most of the crosses we see like have been covered, but he was actually naked.
Yeah. Yeah. And Christ was naked, but felt no shame.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's because he redeems that. Right. So he even redeems the shame.
Mm-hmm.
Fun insert. That's also where the modesty comes in.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Like,
yep. Yeah. Modesty is meant to, again, you know, reveal, you know, part of the person. Right. Okay. So another important concept is espousal, meaning the body. I'm going to try to move a little faster because we still have 7 more slides. So you will see this throughout where he talks about the nuptial meaning or spousal meaning of the body. And what he essentially means, well, he means 2 things. He means that the male body is in a certain sense incomprehensible without the female body. And the female body is incomprehensible without the female or the male body. But what it also reveals, right, is that we are made to be a gift. Right. So he calls this the hermeneutic of the gift, that we receive a gift from God and are supposed to transmit that gift to other people. Right. Like that's stamped into our bodies. So he says, in fact, the gift reveals, so to speak, a particular characteristic of personal existence, or rather of the essence of the person. When God Yahweh said, it is not good that man should be alone, he affirmed that alone man does not completely realize this essence. So just what I said, like in a certain sense, Adam doesn't really know what he's for until he meets Eve. And even more deeply and completely by existing for someone. This norm of existence as a person is shown in Genesis as characteristic of creation, precisely by means of the meaning of these two words. Alone and helper, these words indicate as fundamental and constitutive for man, both the relationship and the communion of persons. So John Paul II, his favorite quote is from the Second Vatican Council that essentially ties into this idea of the nuptial meaning of the body. Says, indeed, the Lord Jesus, when he prayed to the Father that all may be one, as we are one, opened up vistas closed to human reason. For he implied a certain likeness between the union of the divine persons and the unity of God's sons in truth and charity. This likeness reveals that man, who is the only creature on earth which God willed for itself, cannot fully find himself except through a sincere gift of himself. So that last line is essentially him saying what the meaning of life is. The meaning of life is to make a sincere gift of yourself, right? First to God, like in return for the gift that he's given you of existence, but then also to other people, right? And in a very unique way, and only in, one manner is to your spouse, okay? There can be an objection, and it can be sometimes it's a translation thing. This idea that man is the only creature on earth which God willed for itself. What does that mean? Does it mean that God made man for some other reason than his glory? No, right? Like that's why God creates. But what he's talking about is man has the power of self-determination, right? And so this idea that man gets to determine whether he's going to cooperate with God, whether he's going to be alone with God, all of these things are left to man to determine, right? And so that's what he means, right? And what John Paul II is saying is that that power of determination always ought to be, our freedom always ought to be ordered towards making a gift of ourselves. And it also means, right, if something is willed for its own sake, it means it can't be a what? A means, right? Right. So man should not ever be just a means, right, to an end. Right.
Yeah.
He always has to be freely participatory in the end that you're choosing. Right. So man should never be used as a means, right? And that he lives not for his own sake, but for the sake of making a gift of himself. All right. Okay. The meaning of the nuptial meaning. This sort of ties back to this meaning indicates a particular capacity of expressing love in which man becomes a gift. On the other hand, the capacity and deep availability for the affirmation of the person corresponds to it. This is literally the capacity of living the fact that the other, the woman for the man and the man for the woman, is by means of the body, someone willed by the Creator for his or her own sake. The person is unique and unrepeatable, someone chosen by eternal love. All right, so what is he saying here? Is that the giving has to be what? Reciprocal and mutual, yes.
Yeah.
And ultimately, why does it have to be unique?
Because of right, it's reciprocal and
Well, can I give myself completely and totally to more than one person?
No.
No, right? Like, but again, limitations are good. Like that's the problem, right? I can only give myself completely and totally. Yes.
Which person?
Oh my god! I was thinking the same
So-
question.
No, so not in that capacity, right? Like I'm like on a natural level, you can only give yourself. On a supernatural level, in a certain sense, like that's the expansion of our capacity in the communion of saints, and because in a certain sense, you can give yourself like more completely within a communion of saints than you can even in marriage in this life, right?
Yeah, God can love us on a different level than we're capable of love. That's why he can like love all of us more than like.
And
we
when
can love.
with us, when we're infused with God's love, we love.
Yeah,
We can
and
love like He loves, right?
And he can like genuinely, truly love all of us, right?
but-
Not just the collective, but it's individuals.
But the point, like his point here, right, is, and this is where, going back to what he calls the sort of the ethos of the gift, the ethics of the gift, right? Like he would say, if you're supposed to make a gift of yourself, right, that means you don't withhold, right? And so he's getting at a little bit of the logic of why contraception is wrong, right? And he calls it the ethos of the gift, right? Like the gift has to
Yeah.
be sincere and complete and total.
Yeah, contrary to that.
And an act of contraception is contrary to that, right? And so he calls it essentially calls it a lie or a betrayal of the sign, that especially the marital embrace is meant to be.
Yeah, I guess like the way he's reading this into a lot of the sexual ethics and like the sexual morality is the fact that like you cannot like those. I think that this is one of the other, when I was trying to understand Christianity, one of the compelling reasons for me for Catholicism was that the words actually have specific meanings and that there is like a way to act them out. So like in marriage, you can't say I love you without actually entailing what it means by conclusions, right? So I guess he says that with regards to contraception, and that it's like it's two-faced about its love, right? Like
Yeah. So what, like,
you're not
what does the marital embrace, like, what is the meaning of it? What are you saying to a person? Like, what are you saying to what are you saying to a woman when you want to have sex with her?
I love you completely, and like the love that the fruits of our love, like the fruits that generate from our love are good.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things you're saying. One, you're saying you're the kind of person I would like to have a child with,
Yeah.
right? Which means there's like a certain permanence, right? And yeah, because there's a certain permanence, you are the kind of person that I will always love. It's not conditional on how I feel right now,
Yeah.
right? And so
we
all of those
acknowledge-
things, yeah. So all of those things, like you're saying, essentially become a lie, right? And it betrays the act itself.
But it wouldn't be. Would it be a betrayal if the person didn't have knowledge of the fruitfulness of the act?
What do you mean by that? Like, in what way?
I'm just trying to think like in the sense that the person like, is it a betrayal because of the fact that we know in the marital act that it is fruitful, and what happens is people then figure out a way to like stop it from being fruitful,
Mhm.
and it's that knowledge of it that actually makes them culpable. Or I would assume that'd be the case, right? Like if you don't know
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so like someone deeply immersed in our culture, like
yeah.
like has no like yeah, they may not be culpable. Like, I mean, they may be culpable for the ignorance of self or like whatever, but yeah, they may not be culpable for what they're doing, right?
I guess that would be another example of a
Well,
set.
Well, it was like the guy that the story I was telling about the guy last week, right? Like that guy
Yeah.
was like he was ignorant of it, right? And it
Yeah.
started his ignorance started fading away, and he's like, yeah, it's like I'd rather be ignorant than to know the truth, right?
Yeah, which is like you could tie that back to the accessibility of the fruit, right? Like
Yeah.
you're still sinning by refusing to be accessible to the
Yep. All right, so I'll sort of skip to the end, the last 2 minutes. All right, so what John Paul II is getting at here a little bit is a question that's common is like, why didn't Adam and Eve have children before the fall? It says, in this affirmation, biblical knowledge seems to acquire an even greater dimension. It seems to take its place in that vision of God himself, which the first narrative of the creation of man ends with. The narrative is about the male and female made in the image of God. God saw that everything that he had made, and it was very good. In spite of all the experience of his life, in spite of suffering, disappointment with himself, his sinfulness, and finally, in spite of the inevitable prospect of death, man always continues to put knowledge at the beginning of generation. In this way, he seems to participate in that first vision of God himself. God the Creator saw and behold, it was very good. And ever anew, he confirms the truth of these words. So, in chapter 4 of Genesis, right, there is Eve has Seth. And when she has, I think it's Cain or Abel, I don't remember which one. She just said, I have given birth to a man. Right. And then chapter 4, she says, with the help of God, I have given birth to a man when she gives birth to Seth. So why the difference?
It's you said for Cain, reasoning for Abel and Cain was something different.
Yeah. What does Eve say? So like something with the help of man,
I
I
have
had
not
a
a
man.
man with the help of the Lord is what,
That's Seth, right?
that's Cain. And again, she bore Abel when I'm looking for Seth. Seth was. I don't see. It
I
doesn't
think-
say anything about Seth. He doesn't say anything specifically in regards.
It's not like chapter 4 is not.
No, I see it with regards to Cain and Abel.
Okay.
I-
All right, so why this sort of why after the fall do we see this sort of now we see children appear?
Well, he has the commandment before the fall.
Yes.
Uh,
And in a certain sense, like there's an obvious like sort of logical reason in the sense of like sort of the first moment of history in a certain sense of the fall. But what is it essentially saying? Like what is Eve's response? Like why does she say that? Like with the help of God, God has given me a man.
she's participating in the act of creation.
Yeah, so like it's procreative, like in the truest sense, right? But it's also an affirmation that life is good, right? So in a certain sense, right, like you could say, and many people do, this is all so messed up. Why would anyone bring kids into the world, right? And yet here we are, like it was so messed up, and certainly there's like the practical reason of there can't be an unfallen race and all of that. But in truth, like what God is showing is that life is an unquestioned good, right? That having a child is essentially participating with God, like please God that you're bringing another saint into the world. But either way, you are creating an immortal creature, right? Like that creature is never going to die, like fully die. And like that creature that you're creating with God will exist forever. And that is an unquestionable good, right? Like you can't, there's no line of goodness between existence and non-existence. Like existence is a fundamental
Yeah,
good,
yeah.
right? And so like,
Can I ask you a question on that now? That's
Yeah.
brief. In my first relationship I was ever in, I got into a conversation with my then girlfriend about contraception and stuff. And she asked me, how is it inherently morally good to bring somebody into the world if you don't know whether they'll end up in hell? And I never really had an answer for that.
And to kind of steel man the point you just made, doesn't Jesus also